Hello, everyone. Welcome to Introduction to Creative Writing. My name is Maya Jeffra, and I'm going to be the facilitator of this course. Um, and I'm really excited about teaching it. I also teach in the graduate program here at Central Washington and in, of course, the upper level classes in the bachelor's program. But I'm particularly excited to teach Introduction to Creative Writing because it's where it all begins. And there are so many ways to explore what creative writing is and what creative writing can be. And so it's exciting to jump into this foray with you as you embark on your creative journey because it reminds me of my own. And it's a circuitous and rather odd way that I came to creative writing. I started as a dancer and a musician, then I became an actor, then I became a visual artist. And all along that journey, I always loved reading and writing, but I have classic dyslexia, which makes my reading apprehension slow, and I have to labor a little bit more with effort in order to write. And so, even though it was something I loved, I loved utilizing language as a means to convey um, ideas, emotions, observations. I came to it late because it didn't come as naturally. But now it's my great passion. So, just a little bit about me. I write primarily nonfiction and fiction. I have two books of essays, um, a book of short fiction, and a forthcoming novel. But I also publish some poetry, even though I don't send out my poetry very often because I'm not confident about it. But I love reading it. So basically, I engage in all three types of creative writing that we're going to be exploring in this course. Now, of course, there are other forms or genres of creative writing than what we're going to be covering in this class. But we have playwriting, we have screenwriting, we have graphic memoir and story or comics. We have hybrid work. So many different types of creative writing, but you can't do it all in 10 weeks, right? What we're going to cover are the elements of poetry, fiction, and creative nonfiction. But the course is, even though it's designed to address each of those genres to some degree, we're really going to explore more the fundamental aspects of what makes good creative writing across the board. So, just a couple logistical elements to cover before we jump into some content. Um, Once again, my name is Maya Jeffra. Um, you can call me Maya, you can call me Professor Jeffra, whatever is more comfortable to you. On the syllabus is my cell phone. We're obviously all remote. I'm currently in the Bay Area, um, and for a little while, I'll be in my cabin in the Redwoods just because of all the nonsense that's going on in the world right now. The cell phone is the best way to get in touch with me if you need me urgently, but of course, you can also reach me via email. I tend to be pretty good about checking email and responding. Um, and then, of course, we can always Zoom. And so I want to emphasize that I really love visitors. I love the one-on-one relationships, especially in a creative context. So please feel free to reach out to me if you want to chat about your work, if you want to chat about the creative process, if you want to chat about your tenure at Central Washington, if you want to chat about why squirrels always run on power lines. It is entirely up to you, and I'm always privy to have a chat. I get to know you better, and we're in a very vulnerable space when we're writing creatively. So the more we get to know each other, the more we might be able to establish a relationship that makes you feel confident in your development and communicating your development. So please take advantage of that. Also know that we have a prereq in the class. I'm assuming that you have already completed it. It is the two academic writing sequences that you've taken at Central Washington or at another institution. Just make sure that you have, if you have not um, completed that, maybe chat with your advisor, chat with the department to make sure that you can be in this class. You can look at the outcomes for the course. Basically, what we're going to be doing in Intro to Creative Writing is not only dabble in three of the major genres and to become more familiar with their conventions, but we're also going to be practicing a lot of creative writing and reading a lot of writing. Um, in our class, it's almost entirely contemporary writing, and you'll see it's from a broad spectrum of writers and styles, and regions and content and um, various themes. I mean, how do we introduce ourselves to contemporary creative writing and do so in a way that really represents just how diverse and how across possibilities it means to be a creative writer? There is no one way to be a poet, a fiction writer, a nonfiction writer, a playwright. So I'm trying my best to throw in as much as we possibly can, but obviously within a manageable manageable time frame for you to read it. Um, but yes, that is primarily what our course is going to be. We're going to read a lot of work. We're going to examine it and look for the strategies that it embodies so that maybe we can possibly steal some of those strategies. We're going to become more familiar with the nomenclature or kind of the vocabulary of each of the genres and conventions. And then, of course, more broadly, what constitutes good creative writing? And you can see the grade breakdown here and the required texts. We don't have a single text. And that's mainly because, again, we have to try to be as diverse as possible. And you'll notice the writers come from all kinds of identities, they come from all kinds of regions, they write about very different um, concepts and we have a little speculative fiction in there, we have slam poetry, we have nonlinear essay writing. I mean, it's all across the board, right? I wish I could have even added more, but I need to make sure that you're also sane. But the way that we're going to assess our course, you can look at the grade breakdown on page 1 of the syllabus. We will have weekly discussions, like I said, about the readings. And that's largely so that we identify craft strategies. So, craft being the way that a writer is making meaning in an effective way, the way that they are conveying, um, whether it be the theme of the work or the style of the work or the overall kind of emotional imprint of the work, what kind of tools they are using, what kind of strategies they are using in order to convey their intent. Because that's what all creative writing is about, right? An author trying to convey their intent. How they go about doing that, well, that's what we're looking at in the readings and the discussions that we do. Some writers you will really not connect with, right? Other writers you will. And you want to be paying attention to that as you read because when you do connect to a writer, if you feel impacted by a writer, you might want to figure out why you feel impacted so that then you can identify what craft strategies they use and then you can steal them, right? You can be inspired by them, you can emulate them for your own development of your craft. for the creative writing that you do. So that's why we have the discussions. We also have weekly exercises every week where you get to just practice. These are low stakes and purely generative. Some of them may turn into something more formal for you, um, either in this course or in the future. Others are just a way to kind of, lift some weights. Yeah. We all have to exercise to have that great physique. We have to exercise our writing to to have great product. And so we will always be doing the exercises. But again, low stakes with little feedback, more just a way to practice. But then we will be submitting more formal works in progress in each of the genres, poetry, fiction, and nonfiction. And with those, you'll get more involved feedback from me, and then you'll also be assigned a peer reviewer who will the two of you will work together on the journey of your piece, your work in progress. These will also be accompanied by an intention statement that you submit when you submit that work in progress. That way, you're constantly fashioning the language that you need to have around what it is you want to achieve with your work. Now, a lot of times in creative writing, we don't even know what we want to achieve. We just start doing it. And that's okay too. But eventually, we need to discover, okay, what is it that we're trying to convey with this particular work? And the more we begin to fashion a language articulating our own intentions, the more we can be helped in the critique process. And certainly, the more we begin to understand who we are as a creative writer. That's always the magic, the self awareness as you grow in a studio practice, whether it be creative writing, whether it be sculpture, whether it be dance. Okay. And then all of this will culminate into a portfolio where you embrace the beauty and the power of revision. And you even make statements about the revision process. Okay. So notice, we're not just writing in this class, we're also reflecting on our writing in this class so that we can begin to understand what kind of creative writer we are, what kind of process we want to engage in, who we are. That's really necessary as you cultivate your creative self because we all have a different process, we all have a different style. And the more we become aware of that, the more that we begin to understand who we are and what we intend to do. I'm very excited about this. So you can read all of the syllabus in general. There's a lot of important information out there, especially resources for you all. Um, so make sure that you take a glance at the syllabus. It is the contract. I just wanted to lastly go over the weekly schedule just very briefly. I think it's pretty intuitive. All of the required readings are listed in the weekly schedule of the syllabus at the end of the syllabus. And it was very difficult for me to, to narrow down what I was going to assign. But like I said, you'll notice the readings are incredibly diverse. In this first week, we are going to be reading a smattering of poetry, fiction, and nonfiction, just so that we can kind of begin our journey. After that, the weeks are divided officially by genre. The first 3 weeks are going to be poetry, the next 3 weeks are going to be creative nonfiction, and the final 3 weeks are going to be fiction. And I organized it that way so that we could at least become familiar with the conventions of each genre. But we learn the conventions so that then we know how to either adopt them if we enjoy them or to deviate from them if we want to experiment. It depends on the kind of creative writer you are. So those are very loosely designed. Really, the way the course is designed is to somehow kind of take a step back and to look at all the genres of creative writing and to somehow identify what are the universal aspects of good creative writing, whether it be in the poetic form, the lyric form, whether it be in the prosaic form, whether it be in the visual form, whether it be in the dialogical form. What we want to ask ourselves is, okay, what are the fundamental aspects that make good creative writing in general? And even though there are no hard, fast rules, there are some elements, there are some characteristics that tend to almost always rise to the top of what makes good creative writing, no matter what genre you're writing in. And that's what I want to talk about very briefly in this intro video, because we're going to be exploring these more deeply as we get into the weeks. There are five kind of fundamental aspects that seem to characterize all good creative writing, no matter what the genre. The first one is imagery and sensuality. 70% of our nerve endings are clustered in our eyes. This is actually just a scientific fact. And we make sense primarily through sight. Do we not? We are first and foremost visual creatures. Now, of course, we have other senses. And thank goodness for any of those who do not have the opportunity to possess them all, right? But visuality tends to be our primary way of making meaning. And that is why there is kind of this established rule in creative writing that you probably have heard even in high school and in middle school, um, maybe even elementary school, the idea of show, don't tell. And the reason for that is writing is actually an abstraction, if you think about it. I mean, bottle or canister. What does that really mean? And I mean, it's different in other languages, right? This bears no significance to the sonic sounds bottle, nor does it bear any resemblance to the visual representation of that sound bottle, right? Bottle. Language is abstract. It bears no physical, concrete relationship to that which it signifies. And so, despite that, it's the primary way that we make meaning, and we're supposed to somehow, with an abstract tool, paint a picture in the mind of the reader. So we have to work extra hard in writing to do that. And that's the reason why we have the rule show, don't tell in creative writing. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's say this. Let's say you're writing a story and your character, Jimmy, is tired. Okay? We could easily write Jimmy is tired. Yes? But that's problematic because one reader, when they hear the word tired, which has no kind of physical experience that's specific, one reader may think about the late afternoon when their kids are all home from school and they're running around and they're trying to make dinner, and grandmom is yelling downstairs because she wants to come up to the living room, and their marriage hasn't been exciting for a while. That's one kind of tired, right? Another reader, when they see the word tired, may think about that it's the aftermath of a 12-mile hike up a mountain. Yeah? Then another reader may see the word tired and immediately conjure in their mind a job that they've been in for way too long and they hate. Another person may read the word tired and think about the feeling they have when they have a lupus flare up. You see what I'm getting at? Tired, as a signifier, bears no specificity of experience. Now, granted, we can obviously tap into our own as a reader when we read that word. But if you're writing a character, for example, like Jimmy, you probably want the experience to be more specific to them, not to the readers. So you need to somehow highlight that specificity of experience. So maybe in this case, Jimmy's eyes began to lower, the lids began to lower at half mast. Their fingers were slightly akimbo, hanging down their side off of their chair. You see what I'm getting at? We have a specific description of, of Jimmy's tiredness. And that's what's necessary if we're going to be conveying an experience outside of our own. Yeah? So, imagery or show don't tell becomes one of the first fundamental aspects of good creative writing. Now, that can extend into all senses. And in fact, we probably want to activate them all because it is through sensory description that we can activate the specific imagination of our reader in relationship to what we're writing. So, tattoo that one on the inside of your arm. Show, don't tell. Another aspect of creative writing that is almost fundamental: energy. I know that seems pretty abstract, right? But energy is the spark that makes a reader pay attention. I mean, this can come from anything, but it's that. It's somehow the the pull between the author or the page and the reader. Hemingway's terse sentences would be an example of that, right? Or George R. R. Martin's kind of elaborate plots with dragons, right? A dragon swishes across the landscape, yeah? We're packed with energized movement. And that, of course, can be accomplished with plot. But like I said, it can also be accomplished with just the quality of the sentence, right? Screenplays that have taut dialogical rapport is a way to create energy, right? Graphic novels that have compelling characters. These are all ways to create energy. And we can explore what that might be as we go through each of the genres. Another aspect of just good creative writing is tension. And tension is when you have two forces that are either juxtaposed or opposed to one another. And that can be done either in the the rhetoric of sentences or lines, where we have different sounds or opposing sounds or rhythms. Um, that can be something that is a little bit more uh, explicit, like a conflict in a story, right? Some kind of push pull that can either be in the lines themselves or it can be in the circumstance of the narrative. Yeah. It could be in the design of the prose or the poem. And so we always want to exact tension as much as we want to exact energy and imagery. Another fundamental aspect of good creative writing is pattern. And that is when we see some kind of repetition existing in creative work. Why is that compelling? It pleases us. When we see a pattern in creative writing, or actually in any design, any kind of cultural production, when we see a pattern, it has us anticipate the existence of the pattern once we recognize that there is one. And that anticipation has us be involved in, in the creative work more. It also creates a psychological connection between the reader and the work that they're reading. With that anticipation, they become involved. It's pleasing to us to feel like we belong to something. And that's what repetition does. Pattern creates that experience. It's like a psychological unity between the work and the writer. And then lastly, the fifth kind of fundamental aspect of all good creative writing is insight. While creative writing can certainly prioritize entertainment, we also need it to be insightful. We need to learn something. We need to see the world through the perspective of other people. This builds our empathy. This builds our understanding. And it can be subtle, but it should be there. No matter what kind of genre or story or poem you're writing, there should always be some kind of opening to a perspective of the world. And so when I boil it all down, those are the five fundamental aspects that make good creative writing: imagery, energy, tension, pattern, and insight. And then, of course, how do we make these things truly happen on the page after we have been divinely inspired and we jump onto the computer and we just start furiously writing? How do we shape our work so that it embodies those five elements? And then, of course, all the other considerations of the conventions of the genre that we're writing in? Well, revision. To re see, that is where a great magic exists for serving the intent of the work that you discover that you are writing for. It is the power of revision. And that is ultimately what we want to walk away from this class with, is understanding just how important, understanding just how powerful revision is. So that's our goal. It's pretty lofty. We got quite a bit to do. And that's why I just want to jump right into our assignments for the week. So, intro week is always a little shorter. So, what I'm hoping that we can do is twofold. One, you're going to be reading some stuff. Like I said, a smattering of some poems, an example of a wonderful nonfiction essay written by Eula Biss. I love this essay. And a very short story by Amy Bender called Job's Jobs, which is kind of an allegory. Also, one of my favorite fiction writers. So you're in good hands. You got some good stuff in this first collection of writing that I'm asking you to read for the week. And what I'm asking you to do is in your intro video where you just kind of let us know a little bit about yourself. We need to know each other because we're in a very vulnerable studio practice based course. Let us know which of these readings you really glommed onto the most and try to explain why. Maybe you can even utilize one of these five fundamental aspects that I've just explored, or maybe you discuss it in a different way. But no matter what, again, we're highlighting what impacts us so that we can figure out, okay, why? Why does it impact us? The more we begin to understand that through our critical lens, the more we begin to adopt it and utilize it for our creative lens. Yeah. So please do that introductory video where you're talking about one of the works. And then we also have our first exercise. And again, this is just to generate. So have fun with those. That's what we have this week. I'm going to be opening up the rest of the the course very soon. I'm just fine tuning a few assignments, some of the discussion questions to make them very specific to the readings that we have. So look out for that very soon. Otherwise, I very much look forward to working with you all. I'm really excited to be reading your work and to see your thoughts and ideas. Have a wonderful week, and let's get started.